Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Who needs more coffee? Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for coming today. My name is Susan MADERA. I'm Academic Program Manager for High Impact Practices at Queensborough Community College, and I'm also the coordinator of the Common Read Initiative. This year's book is The Rhoad of Lost Innocence by Somali Mom. There are many topics in this book on which we can focus, one of which is sexual trafficking, one is human trafficking, and overall we're thinking about human rights. So I would like to first thank NYPIRG, the Males Club, the Haitian Club, College Discovery, the Money Legal Eagle Club, and the Students Veterans Center for sponsoring this event. There are over 1,400 students at Queensborough reading this book this semester. There's also one class at Thomas Edison High School reading this book this semester. We're reading this book at the same time and offering co-curricular events because our hope is that you will start to make connections between the disciplines. Well, what does that mean? That means that the students who are reading this book in the math class are looking at it from a statistical point of view. Those in the business class are looking at it from a business point of view. Trafficking is a huge money-making machine. There are nurses who are looking at the effects of STDs, abortion, sterilization, suicide, child abuse. So as you can see, we're looking at it from many different angles. These events are to help you to connect those pieces. Our goal as a place of higher learning is to raise you up and to have you think globally. If any of you are uncomfortable with the content of this event or of any of the events or the text itself, please feel free to go to our counseling center in this building, the library, room 422. All counselors have read the book and are available to speak with you if you feel that you would like to speak to someone. Please identify yourself as someone who's participating in the Common Read, and anything that you speak to them about will be held in complete confidentiality. Our first speaker today is Megan Rhoad. She is the U.S. researcher in the Women's Rights Division, currently focusing on violence against women. Her work at Human Rights Watch has included documentation of abuses suffered by women in U.S. immigration detention, research into sexual violence affecting Somali women and girls in Kenyan refugee camps, and fact-finding in Haiti on the situation of women and girls displaced by the 2010 earthquake. Rhoad was formerly a Women's Law and Public Policy Fellow at the National Women's Law Center in Washington, D.C., where she researched U.S. federal judicial nominations and analyzed policy developments affecting the economic security of low-income women and their families. Her previous work includes international advocacy projects using the human rights framework to address issues such as reproductive health and gender discrimination in inheritance law. Rhoad is a graduate of Harvard University and Georgetown University Law Center. Please join me in welcoming Megan Rhoad.
Hi, everyone. My apologies for being late. I am actually leaving for Tanzania this evening, and we're doing a research mission there on child marriage, and things have been a bit chaotic trying to get ready for that. Great. So as Susan said, my name's Megan, and I'm a Human Rights Watch researcher. My job is to document human rights violations, specifically women's rights violations, mostly in the US and Canada. I have sort of a geographic focus, but also other places like Tanzania, where I'm going tonight. So what Human Rights Watch does is we're a nonprofit organization. We are not affiliated with any government. We're completely independent. And we work now, we have people in 150 locations around the world documenting human rights abuses, mostly by talking with people who have experienced the violations themselves and putting that information together into comprehensive, in-depth reports that, in addition to analyzing the dynamics of whatever issue it is that we're looking at, also provide concrete recommendations to the government and often to the international community about what we think should be done about the issue. We then release our reports and try and make as much of a media impact as possible to generate the kind of pressure that will push governments to take action. So the part that I was going to talk about today, although I would be more than happy to talk about any facet of my job, was some of the work that I've done in the United States. I should say, first of all, that as a women's rights division, and we've been around since about 1992, our work covers 4 areas, or 4 focus areas, and we call them home, health, work, and war. And essentially these being the different spheres in which we see some of the most egregious violations against women. So with the home, we're talking about things like domestic violence, even property rights, the right to own property as well as to inherit property. Health, we've done a lot of work on reproductive health, including maternal mortality, which is a major cause of death for women around the world. Work, equal rights in the workplace, including the rights of migrant laborers. A big piece of work for us has been on migrant domestic workers, particularly domestic workers who come from parts of Asia to the Middle East, and in order to make money there and send money back home, but who often are subject to abuses in the countries that they work in. And finally, war. We've been a part of efforts to address sexual violence in conflict in terms of getting more recognition of this issue at the international level, at the Security Council, and also documenting where sexual violence has been used in conflicts extensively, as in the Congo. So for my work, however, as I said, is mostly focused on the United States and Canada. And when I began, there was a question of where do you begin documenting women's rights violations in the United States? And certainly there would be any number of options, but the one that stood out to us at the time was looking at how women were treated in the US immigration system. So in relation to what you're reading, I think the information I have to share with you is sort of, it's on the back end of some of the experiences you may have read about. What happens when women, including women who have been trafficked, including women who have been subject to violence en route to the United States, what happens when they then intersect with the US immigration enforcement system? You all may be aware that the Obama administration has deported more people than any other prior administration, and about 400,000 people were detained in immigration detention last year. For a long time, it's been considered the fastest growing form of incarceration in the United States. Women make up roughly 10% of the immigration detention population, though that has fluctuated a bit. So when we looked at this, at first it was like, well, they're only 10%, so does this really have that big of an impact? But it does. And in fact, because women are only 10% of the immigration detention population, they often aren't thought about, and their particular needs aren't thought about. And the way immigration detention in the US works is Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the major federal agency involved, ICE, you may have heard of, operates some of its own immigration detention centers, these large facilities where they jail people, sometimes for months at a time, even in some cases the women we interviewed years at a time, while their immigration cases are pending. But because the federal government doesn't have enough capacity to jail that many people for immigration reasons, as the population that they're detaining has exploded and reached this 400,000 level, they've contracted out more and more space from either local county jails or for-profit detention facilities. which means that oversight and making sure that people's human rights are respected when they're in detention has become even more unwieldy. So our work on this issue meant we went to 9 different facilities, different kinds. Some operated completely by ICE, some local county jails, the whole gamut. We interviewed about 4 women who were either in detention at the time or had recently been released. And they told us about a range of medical care problems that they had while in detention. In particular, we spoke with women who had been raped crossing the Mexico-US border by smugglers, who then were unable to get adequate medical care once they arrived in immigration detention. So sort of the standard care you would expect if you went to an emergency room after a sexual assault was not available to them. They also weren't able to access counseling at a time that was really, a period of crisis in their lives. In addition, there were women who had been living in the community, because I think there's also this misperception that the only people being held in immigration detention are people who just came across the border or just were stopped on the way in. And you all may know better than that actually a lot of people who end up detained are people who had lived here, sometimes with documents for an extended period of time, and then due to some kind of criminal infraction may end up in immigration detention pending deportation procedures. So some of the women we talked to had been seeing their doctor regularly and had found out that they had signs of cervical cancer, and so had gone into immigration detention with this ongoing health need, and then found that they couldn't get checked properly, that it was going to take months for a request for follow-up care to be delivered. And often, in the midst of all of it, they would be transferred to another immigration detention center, and the process would start all over again. So we were very concerned. The same thing with breast cancer too. Women had signs of breast cancer that went unaddressed for months, one case like 7 months at a time. And in some cases, the lack of access to adequate medical care actually made women decide not to fight their immigration case anymore and agree to be deported. Which of course is never something that should be held in the balance when we're thinking about immigration matters, which are in general civil matters. But we also heard about the shackling of pregnant women. And this has become a major human rights, civil rights issue in the country generally when talking about women in prison, women in county jails, it's been found by federal courts to be a constitutional rights violation to shackle someone, to handcuff them or shackle their ankles during the process of labor. And what we found with immigration detention was that, as one detention official told me, I don't like people dying on my watch. I don't like people being born on my watch. So they often would deport women before they were ready to give birth, or they would otherwise find a way to release them into the community on some kind of supervised program. But that didn't stop them from shackling women en route to prenatal appointments. And some of the women we talked to talked about having their hands bound in these trucks that had no restraints, no seat belts or anything like that, and being very concerned about their pregnancy. And that was only, of course, if they were even able to get access to a prenatal appointment, which in some high-risk cases did not happen. There's been a lot of movement since we published our report in 2009, and at the time there was only a single reference to women's health and the detention standards for immigration detention. It said that women would get pregnancy testing and adequate care. Now there's a full detention standard dedicated to women's health, and it prohibits shackling. And that would be the good news, except one, policy is just policy, and you always have to look to see how it's implemented. But also because of the increasing involvement of local law enforcement, like local police officers in immigration matters, it takes this out of the realm of just the federal government and into county policies as well. You all may have heard of the case of Juana Villegas in July, I believe it was July, in 2008. She was arrested on a traffic violation, and it's normally something that she would have been released the same day. It was relatively minor, but she had an immigration hold on her. So when they checked her into jail, they saw that ICE had asked for there to be a hold on her. So they held her over the weekend, and she was pregnant and ended up giving birth during that time when she was on this immigration hold. And it was the policy of the jail to shackle inmates during labor. So they did shackle her. So even though she wasn't technically in immigration custody, there was this major uproar that she had been subject to this. Anyway, the good part about this story is that it brought so much attention to the issue that the county changed its policy, and through a lawsuit, Juana Villegas got a $500,000 settlement last year after fighting the case for 5 years. So those are sort of some of the issues that arose as we were first doing the research. At the same time, as we started to do the advocacy and we started to hear from more people about their experiences, because it was out there that we had done this research and we were in touch with more folks, a healthcare worker at an immigration detention center in Texas got in touch with me, first on an anonymous basis, but then she felt more and more prepared to speak publicly. I'm just going to check on my time. Okay. And she had witnessed deplorable care in this particular detention center in Texas. At the time, it was the biggest detention center in the US. It was called Willacy County Detention Center. And we visited there, and it was sort of the space age-like equipment that they had built with Kevlar tents out in the Texas heat. It was quite a thing to behold. But so this huge detention center, and she had seen awful conditions. And it was through her that we connected with some other folks working in the detention system and found out that there was also a problem of rape. And so we ended up issuing a second report on immigration detention that looked specifically at the issue of sexual assault of women who are being held in immigration detention. It's one of those issues that is difficult to substantiate because the victims are so often deported. And in the meantime, while they're here, have difficulty accessing the kind of remedies that a US citizen or a permanent resident might. For example, being in a detention center, being isolated from the world, perhaps having a language barrier to contend with as well, and fear of very, very real fear of retaliation. So we documented a number of cases, and in the process of dialoguing with Immigration and Customs Enforcement about this issue, we found out that they did not consider themselves bound by the major piece of federal legislation that addresses prison rape. In 2003, Congress passed a bipartisan bill called the Prison Rape Elimination Act, or PREA for short, that was meant to take aim at this epidemic of rape in custodial settings. And part of that was there was a commission that studied the issue, and then they proposed all these different rules that jails and prisons would have to abide by. But the difficulty was, even though the people who wrote the law clearly intended for immigration detention to be covered as well, at about the same time that that PREA was passed, the Department of Homeland Security was created. So whereas immigration detention had previously been under the Department of Justice, it was now under this new entity, which actually was not referenced in the law. A little bit technical, but the point being that there was this sort of legal loophole that they were using to say that they did not have to comply with these basic human rights standards. So that became a focus for our advocacy, not just ours, but many groups, and we worked very closely with the ACLU on this. You all may be aware of the Violence Against Women Act. Well, it was that law first passed in 1994, a landmark piece of legislation for women in the United States. Was reauthorized last year, so it was renewed. There was the new law, and as part of that piece of legislation, Congress demanded that the Department of Homeland Security issue regulations that would provide comparable protection for immigration detainees as any other prisoner in the United States when it comes to sexual assault and rape. So. Yeah, that's just I guess an overview of my work, and I'd be happy to answer questions now or later. Susan, did you decide whether we do Q&A?
Does anyone have any questions for Megan at this time?
No questions at this time. Well, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
We're just going to switch mics. At this time, I'd like to introduce Sister Mary Catherine Hamm. Mary Catherine Hamm is a sister of charity who grew up in Suffolk County, Long Island, and has worked most of her life in New York and New Jersey. Currently, she serves as coordinator of education for LifeWay Network, a nonprofit whose vision is a world without slavery. She began her connection with LifeWay in 2007. Throughout her ministries in education and pastoral work, Katie has integrated advocacy for peace and justice. She appreciates being at LifeWay Network because her work in schools, parishes, and civic groups has allowed her to meet so many people who are passionate about a better future and ending the scourge of modern-day slavery. Please join me in welcoming Sister Katie.
I love media, and I hate media. I'm never sure I can count on it. So I'm hoping that maybe your generation is a generation that actually believes that when you put something in, it'll turn out all right. I can't tell you how many times I've brought a PowerPoint and nothing happens, and I'm like, okay, let's just go with talking. That's good. So I'm really glad to be here, and I'm glad to see that you're here, because I consider it an act of courage to come to any kind of talk about human trafficking. Because when you hear it, you can never unhear it. Once you know it, there's a call inside to do something. And I'm here to tell you, I don't know what you can do, but I know you can do something. So at the end of this talk, that's what I'm hoping, that you'll say, I learned something, and I know that I can do something. Because we are the solution. This is a huge, I won't say problem, but challenge. If you consider that we live in a world in 2014 that has 30 million slaves worldwide. 30 million worldwide is the population of Canada. So if you said all the Canadians are enslaved, look at the gifts that are lost. Look at the futures that aren't happening. Look at the discoveries, all the pieces of 30 million people. Because each of us, I'm sure, have been taught to value the life of one person. So even if I told you it's only 10, you'd say that's too many. In 2014, in this world that can send people to the moon, you know, we are going to do something about it today. And so when you leave here, I don't want anybody to feel guilty. I don't want anybody to feel hopeless. I want you to leave here with hope, with an idea, and with people you can talk to about it, okay? All right, so you know that I come from a generation that was called baby boomers. so we're crossing over the line here. So I'm really hoping to hand it on to you. I'm handing on the torch because I don't know if it'll happen in my lifetime, but I'm sure that it can happen if everyone that you know, hears about it does one thing. Okay, so this is, I was invited to talk about the organization that I belong to, and it's a great little organization. It's called LifeWay Network. And then the image is a dove with chains down there, and the collaborating to combat human trafficking. So, you know that it's not just us. There's many, many organizations. You just heard about Human Rights Watch. You know that lots and lots of people are taking different tactics to try to address this problem, right? Our nonprofit was founded in 2007. So 2007 isn't that long ago, right? 7 years. And it was founded by somebody just about my age. And I thought maybe, you know, a lot comes out of a name. So you know that the idea of life is not just about surviving, it's about thriving. So when Sister Joan Dauber, who's the founder, thought about this name, she said, I'm going to call it LifeWay. Okay? Now, somebody just last year pointed out that when people are talking about women who are sometimes in prostitution, they say, it's the life. It's the life. But that's not really the life that allows you to thrive. So this idea of LifeWay, which is a life where you are independent, where you have connections, where you are free, that's the kind of life we want for everyone that we're involved with. So, you know, I'm sure, that Sister Joan was just an ordinary person working in an ordinary parish in St. Michael's in Flushing, okay? So she's working there doing parish work, and it was maybe 2005 when it first came out that there was a call to all of sisters in the global network to say, let's look at this issue and see if there's anything that we can do to address it. Now, the one thing good about being in a global network is you have feet on the ground everywhere. So they had this annual meeting in Rome, and people that are in different countries can say, you don't know what's happening here, you don't know what's happening here, and so on and so on and so on. And so the call came out, and Sister Joan heard the call, and she said, no, not me. Not me. That's too much. It's too violent. It's too big. Okay, so she said that a couple times, and then I guess it finally came to her. She says, well, if I don't do it, who will do it? No, nobody wants to start an organization in a way. It's like not a goal because you know that it's going to cost you, right? Starting anything costs you. So she couldn't resist it any longer because she said, if not me, who? All right? And so she took the step. I mean, and that's the way it is with any organization, even Somali Mom. You take one step. You take one step, and then it leads you to the next step, and it leads you to the next step. You don't think Somali Mom thought in the beginning, I'm going to write a book. No. It's like, let me do the first thing that comes in my way, and that'll lead me to the second thing. So the idea was, that's what happened here. So Sister Joan Dauber took the first step, and she started a nonprofit. Sounds like an easy thing to do. Let me just start a nonprofit. But something like that takes a year or two. You know, nothing goes fast. Nothing goes fast. And so the idea of a nonprofit is nobody makes money. It's not about making money. The idea of a nonprofit that it's really about common good. What can I do to increase the welfare of people who need help? And so that's what this nonprofit does. It has two purposes, really. One of the purposes is to provide safe housing. And the second purpose is to provide education and public awareness, because they go hand in hand, okay? Now, so I told you that the worldwide statistic is, we say, 29.6 million from the Global Slavery Index people. But you say, well, that's far away, that's overseas, that's not here. Well, actually, it is here. It is here. They have statistics, and again, the statistics are always like nebulous, you know, how can you be sure that's the number? So they say between 15,000 and 17,000 foreign nationals cross over our borders for the purpose of trafficking. 15,000 to 17,000 cross into our borders, you know, for the purpose of trafficking. Similarly, they say between 200,000 and 300,000 youth are at risk. At risk. So who are the at-risk youth? You'll probably know some. Okay, you've probably seen them. They've probably been in your high school, right? People who have homelessness, have abuse at home, who have maybe mental health issues, you know, people who are vulnerable, those who are at risk. So, just to say, it's a big problem. It's something that does touch our shores, does touch our towns, does touch our main street. And that's why you're part of the solution, because that's where you are. You have the eyes, you have the ears, you have the will. You can make a call. You can make a judgment. You can move something forward because you're there. So I like to think of you as the feet on the ground. You're the abolitionist of this time. The abolitionists are the ones who want to get rid of slavery. So that's who you are now, because I'm sure if I said, you know, who wants to get rid of slavery, every hand would go up. Because we know that the world is richer when people are free, okay? So, anyway, I thought I'd just say something, it'll kind of cross back again, but maybe just about the vulnerable youth. We are currently in partnership with Covenant House. How many have heard of Covenant House? Everybody, right? I mean, Covenant House is for runaway youth. It's known. And every year, they see 3,000 runaways coming through the doors in New York. 3,000 runaways a year. And of those 3,000, they have determined, there's a study out by Fordham University, that 1/4 have been trafficked. So that's, 800 people coming through the doors. If you are homeless, don't have a place, you know that somebody will do anything to survive, right? Right, survival. Survival is the key. I drive down the Union Turnpike and I see this little bus shelter, and the bus shelter has a picture of a girl. She looks kind of sad, and it says, I asked him if I could stay the night, and he said, go out and make some money. So these things are all around us. This is something that is not far away, but close. So I've been telling you about big numbers, and I hope you heard me say a research study done by Fordham, and you heard about the research done. If anybody here wants to go into research, I mean, I never knew what the importance was until this comes along, because if you don't have data, then you can't ask for money for grants. So having data, having information, really concrete information, not just guesses, this is important. So anybody who is a person who likes research and wants to get something on this, this is a direction to go. Okay, so how many beds are particularly targeted for human trafficking victims in the United States? 2,138 nationwide. I told you there are 200 to 300,000 people at risk, youth, more than that if you're going above that. So just to say, there is nowhere near the number of beds. Okay, so if someone is rescued, where do they go? Well, sometimes they get to go to domestic violence shelters. Sometimes they're just put up in a motel room until the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office can get a case going. But just to say, there are not enough beds. So LifeWay Network didn't meet a need there. Okay, so one of the things that's special about LifeWay Network is that it has a idea that there's a welcome environment where women can heal and find a new life in safe and secure housing. The welcome environment uses the phrase like a community base is there. So in our house right now, there are sisters, similar to myself, who have used this as their base place where they stay. So they are in the house every day, making meals, doing whatever it takes to be like a kind of a family welcoming community. And we found out that this is where people heal. So I'll give you just 2 stories of survivors. Okay.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Katie, some of these students have to go to another class.
Okay.
So there'll be a little,
This movement. So these are 2 stories. The names, of course, are changed, but the situation is true. So one of our young women who came actually came because she was lured by the offer of a job by somebody in her town in Africa. Okay, so it wasn't like this that she was going and she was hoping that she could, be in trafficking. She was actually coming to better her life. That's why people respond. They're lured by, come, you'll get an education. Come, you'll have some money. You can send it home again. I mean, it's always a positive reason why they fall into these traps. Okay, so this young woman came and she was going to be a nanny, and meanwhile, besides being a nanny, she would also be able to get her education. When she came, the situation was really different, and what she ended up being was being enslaved domestic servant. That amount of time was 6 years. I think when you think about 6 years of a person's life, if you think of 6 years, that's a long time. A lot happens in 6 years. Part of the enslavement includes abuse, whether it's physical, mental, emotional. It's like, you are less than I am. You don't deserve respect. One of the ways in which this particular person was shamed was she was the one who prepared the meals, yet she had to sit on the floor to eat hers. Now that's the United States of America. That's the United States of America here. So when I met this woman, she was in the safe house. And the way that she had eluded her enslavers, her perpetrators, was that she actually was assisted by a neighbor who noticed that this woman never left the yard, never got out of the small neighborhood territory. And so she sent the woman, she got in contact with her. During the day, the woman was on her own when the child was at school, but I guess she got a message to her, and they together contacted Safe Horizon. And that's how she got, eventually to safety. So when I met her, it was a day when the weekends they like to cook their own foods because they're coming from different countries. So this particular woman was from Africa. There was a special greens that she was preparing. And I'm sitting in the living room because volunteers go there to be like doorkeepers and to protect so that nobody gets in that shouldn't get in. So this particular day, she's cooking her food and she's singing. And it just made my heart stop because I said, the resilience of a person who for 6 years was made to feel less, was made to feel like she was worth nothing, was coming back to herself, was coming back to knowing that she, had a future. And I think that's the thing. When you are enslaved and you say no way out, no future, the thing that I guess I would hope they would feel would be our loving presence, our desire to not let them stay one day extra. So that's what so now if you were going to say, well, what could I do? Well, if you're a nurse, you never know who's going to cross through your pathway in the emergency room. You never know. I have given lots of talks at different places, and after I've given the talks, the women, one woman came up to me and says, I worked in the emergency room over in Coney Island. I think if I had known then what I know now, I would have reported it. If I had known then what I know now. But you never know who's going to cross your path. Another thing, I just heard this recently, so I just want to tell you. I talk in parishes sometimes, and so I was talking to this priest, and he says, well, we want you to come because there's a woman in our group that when she heard about trafficking, she said, that's what happened to me. See, it's a place, had Croatia, had different nationalities there, but she didn't know the name of it. And that's what happens because sometimes people can't identify it. So you just have to, I mean, even if you call up a friend, a neighbor, and say, guess what I learned today? This is what human trafficking looks like when somebody, is not in control of their own documents, and somebody can't go out of the yard, when somebody has to have somebody else speak for them. That's called trafficking, and it's a crime. And the person who is trafficked is a victim, not a criminal. So that's part of the information that as you learn more about trafficking, you'll be the one that says, everybody should know this because you never know. You never know where your information could make a difference. Okay, just one more story. This next picture here. Well, you know about the cranes, right? The cranes. Well, some of the women make the cranes, and we actually use them as like a fundraiser type of thing because we believe that idea of peace eventually coming and freedom eventually coming is something that we all want together. So the community is one of caring, acceptance, listening, trusting, safety, stability. How do we know that? Well, at the end of last year, some of the women wrote thank you letters to our donors, and one of the letters that one letter from one woman said, I thank you for LifeWay House because I can sleep deeply. Now, I take sleep for granted. I love to sleep. I mean, I hit the pillow and I'm out in 5 minutes. People are jealous of me. But if you can imagine someone who's trafficked, that they can never sleep. They always have to be on their guard. They always have to say, at any moment they're vulnerable. Okay? So the idea of sleeping deeply was one thing the women were grateful for. Another thing a woman was grateful for was she said, thank you for caring about me without even knowing me. Because they do get gifts, and I understand somebody collected things today. We really appreciate it. So the idea of people giving them things is just like beyond what they can imagine could be happening to them. And then the last one is thank you for listening, because when they go home to that caring community where the sisters are, and they can know that they will be listened to. So listening, and we take it for granted, right? People are going to listen to us. We have friends. But this is like a new reality. So people who are survivors come back, and they have to relearn trust, relearn community interactions, and it's a challenge. But our goal is that they have independent living. So places like Safe Horizon, Sanctuary for Families, we have lots of partners that provide the social services that this women need. There's a picture here of a garden. It's not the women at the garden, but we do have a garden. So gardening is one thing that brings healing and hope. And then the food that they value, the food that's their kind of food that they like, and they cook for themselves. So you have to learn what you need to learn to make you able to be independent again. The women at LifeWay are all different ages, but they could be as old as 40. We have one that's 40, and then between 18 and 40. And one woman celebrated her 21st birthday at the house. And this particular woman was very touched because she had never had a birthday cake before. 21, never had a birthday cake before. And I mean, the things that we take for granted, the things that we say, this is owed me. Everybody should celebrate my birthday. It was a new thing. So everybody was crying. So just to say, little things change lives, little by little by little. I mean, I think when you read the Somali Mama, I did from the very beginning, how she had that a poor self-image. You know, I'm not pretty, I'm dark, I'm not this way, I'm not that way. And then, you know, bit by bit, she learned her own true self, you know, and she could help others. Well, that's what I think, I mean, with little things like birthdays and Christmas and listening and dinners. This particular woman, I think another one actually, was from, we have people from Africa, from Latin America, and we also have some from the United States that come to our house. One particular woman, to celebrate her birthday, she wanted to do the cooking, because that was something that made her happy, to make the food for the family that was there, the gathered community. Other people, when part of their slavery was to make the meals and to sit on the floor, don't want to cook, and they can't cook, and it wouldn't be right. So just to say that everyone's different. So success. I mean, they have 1 year in our house. That's about it, 1 year. You know, you say, what? You know, if somebody's been enslaved for 6 years, will 1 year make a difference? It does make a difference, okay? So, but there's a continuous, I'll say, outreach to keep an eye, to invite them back, to make sure. So by the end of a year, it's our hope that they will be able to support themselves, be in some kind of a living situation that meets their needs, and that they will, you know, have had the training and all that they need to move forward. I would think you probably would need therapy for the rest of your life, you know, you could, but during the year they, you know, are able to have services from the social service agencies that work with us. These are some of the partners. These people, you know, when you say who's working against human trafficking, they're here. They're here. They're people out there that are working to try to address a particular need that they know is around. So these people will recommend people to come to us, and if we have room, we will. I wanted to say something about the partnership. You know that the government, I think Megan mentioned, you know, when there's legislation, that's good, but then you need legislation needs to have money. Because if you make the laws, you have to have the money to do whatever the services are, right? So the money that government provides for trafficking victims goes to the social service agencies. And that's why when I talk about LifeWay Network, it's based on donations, really. That's how we run ourselves. We're not making money from the government. Financial support comes from this group here, the New York CRC Stop Trafficking, is the religious congregations in New York State. And there are 38 that belong to this, 38 congregations. And they come from Albany, as well as Long Island. And they provide some money to us to run LifeWay House. Grants, we have a full-time grant writer. Again, you might be the kind of person who likes to write grants. Grants are a wonderful resource if you can actually tap into it, but some grants are like hundreds of pages long. I mean, I thought they were like 2 pages long. No, they're long. And because the grantee, you know, the grantors want to make sure that you have something worthwhile they're putting the money into. And we have fundraisers, direct mail appeals. So I said we have a safe house and we have an educational component. Ta-da! I'm the educational component leader. And so I'm always looking. Are there people here that like to give presentations, that like to talk to groups? Do you like to go to a library? Would you like to speak? You all belong to groups. Would you like to lead a book club discussion? I'm your man. As far as resources, if I can help you, I will. If you want training, I'll help you. You know, you have, as I say, it's like we're reaching out. So my particular connections are mostly with Catholic church stuff, right? Catholic schools, Catholic parishes, but there's a million people who need to hear this message, and it's not a particular religious message, it's a human rights message. So anybody who wants to be an educator, and I don't mean you have to be like talking to 2,000 people, you can talk in a small group. And you'd just be surprised about the sparks that go. Okay, so you want to talk at a round table somewhere? I'll give you the stuff. If you don't have it, I'll help you any way I can. So just to say, I'm leaving cards and I'm leaving materials, even like giveaway sheets, just to give you information. And you can call me up and we can talk if you want to do more than that. I have helpers from the age of high school to 75. So anywhere in between there, if you're not the one, maybe you can get your mother or your sister or your brother or your whatever to get involved. And when I see young men here, I want to say that's some important population that we want to get involved in this, because sometimes people say, oh, let the women do it, let the women do it. We can't do it. It's a human issue. Young women, the average age of entry into the life is between 12 and 14. 12 and 14. If you think about that age in the United States, I'm not talking some other place, I'm talking the United States, and young men, 11 to 13. So to get the information out, to let them know that there are predators. There are predators, okay? They're online, which wasn't a problem when I was a kid because I didn't even know what online was. But online, making contact, and there's lots of stories like that to tell you, you've got to be careful. You've got to be careful. Okay, who can help? Anyone who wants to? I like to give you a variety. These are the two nuns from Albany, and they work because of the Albany state capital. They can do lobbying and stuff like that really easily. This man over here, if you look in the website, New York State Abolitionist, you will see about 40 people. And the 40 people include Joan Darber, but they include this man here, who's got a men's organization that he's running, to combat human trafficking. Because, there are judges, there are lawyers, there's dance troupes, there's all kinds of people that are the New York New Abolitionists. If I were able to do this myself, I would take your pictures. I would say, you're the New York New Abolitionist, and all I had to do is put you in black and white, and you could be on that website. Because I'm sure that you could say, this is why I don't want human trafficking in my world, and this is what I'm willing to do about it. So just to say that's the truth. And then the public outreach. This young woman is from the College of Mount St. Vincent. She said I could take her picture and put it there. If anybody, she came for some trainings. She has given talks particularly about internet safety. So just to say that there can be a particular focus that you want to say, I actually want to work on this particular angle of it. And of course I put Somali Mom because her story has touched so many hearts. And, Harriet Tubman. Sojourner Truth. Okay. This is a picture called The Torn Woman. And it was done by Doris Klein. And I don't know, does anybody do art here? Well, if you do art, the thing was she made a mistake. And I guess you try to erase the mistake and the paper got scraped away. And then from the torn person, she made a picture. And the picture expresses somewhat what happens. When everything is ripped away, when your freedom is taken, when your self-esteem is made low, when you are exploited and used, you're broken, And so, but the torn woman here carries that scar and she's looking forward, she's moving ahead. And I think that's the thing, that what we see about the survivors is they are strong. The ones that come out are actually the best advocates, because when they speak, they know what they're talking about. And so this is the idea, is that, we are never able to be advocates alone. We're always with the women. I brought pictures because we do have some pictures, and one of the women said we could have her picture shown. But these are just pictures about our house, and we know that when we're talking, it's for them, not for ourselves, and that one woman's life makes a difference. Our Pope is really big on human trafficking. I wondered if that's because he comes from Latin America. I mean, as soon as he came, he was, let's say in June, he was made, pontiff, and then all of a sudden he's having a trafficking convention worldwide in November. But the line that he says is, human person ought never to be sold or bought as if she were a commodity. And that's the thing. People are people, not things. There's no price tag on a person. You can't put a price tag on a person. So anybody that does that, we know that they are looking at an object. So whoever uses human persons in this way and exploits them, even if indirectly, is an accomplice. So we, on the other hand, are the advocates. We are not the accomplices. We are trying continually to raise the spotlight, to expose it to the sunlight, and that will destroy the evil. And President Obama also made this pledge, about human trafficking. And so what they have is they have a government and faith-based communities working on it. They have the civic community, they have the UN community. All communities are working on it. The college community is working on it. You're part of a community of people that are looking at this same issue today. When I think about the Pope, because I like this one, and he says something like, I worry about it. And I said, I never heard a Pope say, I worry about something, but I guess he does. And he worries about human trafficking, and I think that's because he's seen it firsthand in Latin America, and that's why he worries about it. This is Nelson Mandela's quote, everyone says it's impossible until it's done, okay? If you think about all of creation, all of humanity and creation moving forward, we all say human trafficking has to end. Is it possible? It is. It is. If we don't have that hope, then we're lost. So, I work with people who provide housing. Is it for a lot of people? No. This one holds 5 people. Our second house that we're working on with Covenant House could hold 10. That's 15. But I'm one person, and there's lots of people working on this issue. So what we are hoping is that, by the time that you're in power, in places of influence, you'll be able to say, human trafficking is something that we are determined to see end in our time. And where do you look? What do you do? I mean, that may be the thing. You say, well, what could I do? There's so much. Well, I can't tell you what you can do. I can tell you some places you can find some help. So I made some handouts, and you can take them at the end. I don't have to tell you, but I'll just tell you what's here. Because I think sometimes if I just give you the paper, it might go in the garbage, so don't take it unless you want it. But here's, it's 2 sides. I am the biggest Google fan in the world. I'm so glad I'm alive in the time of Google. When I was a kid, we had the Encyclopedia Britannica, great big fat books. And they weren't easy to access, whereas this Google thing, type in anything and it pops up back to you, right? So I put on here titles of books. I put in here websites, and I put in here movies, okay? So there should be something there for everybody. If you're the type that likes websites, I can't say enough about Polaris Project. I hope that you know that one and you look it up, because that's like the bottom line of getting information, the Polaris Project. I brought pens. You can tell I'm used to working with kids. Littler than you. But if you want a pen, they're great. And the thing that's good about it, it has the human trafficking hotline number on it. Have you heard about the hotline number from Polaris Project? Because I think you should have it in your phone already. So I'm going to tell you this number. All right? This number comes out of the website Polaris Project, which is in New Jersey, which isn't that far. If anybody wants to do an internship, think about New Jersey and the Polaris Project. And this is the hotline number. So it has 3 8s in the beginning and 3 8s at the end, okay? And in the middle is 3737. So here's the number, 888-3737-888. So we'll say that after me. 888-3737-888. One more time, if you want to put it in your phone, okay, if your memory's not good. Okay, 888-3737-888. Now that number, if you suspect something, not if you know it, if you suspect it, is the number that you call. Okay? And they'll take care of it. You're not supposed to go and confront the evil yourself. Right? You're supposed to call this number and say, you know, I notice a van that comes back and forth every day. The people look like they're being forced, you know, whatever. Okay? Now, you know, the places we're talking about where they have found human trafficking victims are like nail salons. How many go to nail salons? Okay, nail salons. Okay. Massage parlors. I live across the street from a 24/7 massage parlor. I'd like to know how many people need it 24/7. Okay, so I'm just saying there's a person from one of the churches near us who says they have a parishioner, and the parishioner said she's a receptionist there, and this is what they say. If somebody like me comes in, they say, okay, want a massage? Okay. If a guy comes in, they say, want a massage? Anything else? You know, so I'm just saying, you know, they know it's going on, but when unregulated places, sometimes this is what happens. Now, the idea is that number is important, so the Polaris Project thing is important. I don't want to take up too much time because maybe you have questions or stuff like that, but I would just recommend if you take this paper home, then you'll have actually a page where you can go further. But if you Google anything, I'm sure that you will find there's the CNN Freedom Project. So media is trying to do something. And like they're little short videos, like 3 minutes, 4 minutes, you can find that. I didn't talk really too much about labor trafficking per se, but you can find a lot about labor trafficking worldwide, and you can find about your global slavery footprint. You know how they have an ecological footprint? Well, there's also a slavery footprint. And that's, you know, one of the websites here has it on. So I would just recommend that you do whatever you can to expand your knowledge. Maybe you say, oh, I'm going to give myself a half an hour a week. Because I know you've got a lot to do with studying and stuff like that. But a half an hour a week, you say, this is my human trafficking learning time. Or maybe I'll just, you know, watch a movie, and then there's a movie down here and talk about it. So I'll just say that's a piece of information for you, plus the pens. Plus, if anybody wants to call me up, I have cards. I'm always happy to take a phone call. And this is about, you know that the New York Attorney General's office has a bunch of stuff about human trafficking. And that New York is, let me see, 1, 2, forget what number it is, but in the top 20, let's say cities or metro areas, it's about, I think about 5 or 6. And it says New York, and then it says Long Island. Anybody here from Long Island? Me. Okay, so I'm there. So did you hear about the 7-Eleven stores last year? Well, I said everybody goes to 7-Eleven. That might have been my store, who knows? But I'm just saying, things are going on in front of our eyes and we don't even know it. There's a great writer on this, his name is Kevin Bales, and he loves Indian food. He's from San Francisco, and he loves Indian food. He takes all his friends that come to visit him to a restaurant. He took them to a restaurant, said, isn't this great? And then 2 weeks later, he sees that that particular restaurant owner was picked up for trafficking because people that he had employed in the back place there were victims. So just to say, he's a guy who writes about it, gone all over the world, and he didn't know about it. So just to say that we can all keep learning about it. Okay, and when I go to places, sometimes there are people who have a place where they can hang up a piece of information, okay? This is from the government, the Administration of Child and Family Services. And you can write and get all kinds of free materials for them in all different languages. And you can get brochures, and these are just like posters. And all the theme is called Look Beneath the Surface. So if you have a dorm or store or any place where you can get somebody to hang up something, and you can get it any language you want it in, but I mostly have English and Spanish. And you know, even we don't talk about it too much, but you know, farm workers and you know, all different kinds of people are being featured on here. Look, this one is a farm situation, because wherever things are unregulated, that's where there can be trouble. Okay, and even when they are regulated, as we saw sometimes, there can be trouble. All right, I think if you have any questions for either Megan or myself, we'd be happy to throw some. Yes, Margaret?
I have a question about the number.
Mm-hmm.
Can people report things anonymously on that number?
Yes, I'm pretty sure.
They don't have to be identified?
Yes, you don't have to identify. Really, and what they have is a network of people, so that, because somebody said, well, what are they going to do, send somebody out from New Jersey there? No, I mean, this is a big group that has networks with the FBI, you know, all the different Homeland Security. They're all connected now. And so the idea is that it's worth making the call if you suspect something. I work with a woman who is my age who has a secretary, and the secretary does volunteer work for us because when she was young, she believes that she was next door to a person who was trafficked. And she went to every place that she could, you know, she thought. She went to the police, she went, you know, and the woman was actually hungry. She was digging food out from her garbage. So to help her out, the person made sandwiches for her. Now this is, you know, I'm saying a few years ago. And now the woman says, I believe that that woman was trafficked. If there was the same support system available now, then that woman wouldn't have had to go through this for so long. Yeah.
I just want to emphasize that the person doing the reporting is not identified.
Right. Okay, and it's suspicions. Remember, it's suspicions. It's not, oh, I know this is for a fact, but they'll ask you questions to follow up on it. Anything else? Or for Megan, because this was, I mean, I took notes when she was talking, all right? Yes?
You mentioned that LifeWay has safe housing and there's a 1 year maximum. What happens if there's someone who needs more than 1 year?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's not, I shouldn't say it's like hard and fast, but that's the goal. And there are places. There's a place in, I think it's, I'll say Tennessee, but it's Thistle Farms. Thistle Farms is another kind of place where they have 2 years maximum. You say, well, how long will it take? We have no idea how long it will take. But who can help? I mean, if people have, this is what I was trying to think, when you are a certain age and you can say, well, I would like to take somebody who needs housing, you know, for a room, just to say, how can you help people to make it on their own afterwards? One of the hardest places is to find a place to live, and the next thing, as you all know, how to find a job. Most of them, when they're, I'll say the three people that I've talked to, it was really with that home health aid training is what they have. This has got to do with immigration, but I don't really understand it too much. If a person comes in and they have a status, or these are two statuses that I heard about, continued presence and the T visa. Okay, the continued presence means that they're involved in testifying, I guess, against the trafficker. And so the police department can say they have a legal status, continued presence. If they have that legal status, then they can have work. Okay, if they don't have it, they can't have work. The T visa is really the best, I guess, situation. Do you want, I don't know if you, okay, so the T visa is, this is for people who are coming from another country, right? And when they come in, then they, if they have the T visa, then they have lots of access, like almost like a refugee. So they have better status. I mean, it gets better. But what about if we have a woman that doesn't have anything, even though she could be 30? What does she do all day long? How does she feel better about herself? Because part of it is feeling better about yourself. You have to say, I have a future. And so you could be waiting months and months and months to get to step one, continued presence, and then to the next one. When the women come to us, there was a big raid some time ago. I remember it had like 105 people, and so we were told, be ready, there's going to be lots of people. But actually there were some, and some of those people then came for a little bit of time, but actually they wanted to go back to their country. if they were from Mexico in particular, that was the particular place they wanted to go back to. So sometimes just to know that if they're brought here and they're lured here and they actually have no support system here, they may want to go back to their own place. Okay, anything else?
How people come here? Do they get visas so easily? Like, is it so easy to get a visa and come here?
To be the people that are trafficked?
Traffic, yeah.
Yeah. Gee. Well, Megan, anytime. Okay. My theory is that they are brought in with false papers, right? And even if they have real papers, what happens, and there's like these are the letters that I read, these are signs to look for. And one of them is even if they have the documents, if the person who is their controller takes the documents, it's like that's how they control them, okay? Give me your papers, then you don't have any legal proof that you're here, so it's a way of control. So it's like controlling, it's CAD. These are the signs. You see somebody that's controlling another person, okay? That person, the person that's controlled could be the victim. If you see abuse, physical, emotional, okay, that could be a sign. If you see the documents are in the other person's possession, that could be a sign. This is a story that was told to me about a person going through customs, in the air traffic. And there was an older man with 2 young girls, and the person who was questioning said, who are these young women? And the man said, they're my nieces. And the man said, well, what's their names? And he had to take out the passports. So they caught him. Okay, they caught him. But the guy took one extra step. What's their names? And the man couldn't even say their names. So that's an example of so that's CAD, controlling abuse, documents, and then communication. Communication, CFE is the next one. So communication, who's speaking? Does she have to look and see what he's telling her to say? Can she freely communicate, or is there something going on there? Fear, right? Because the fear could be, I'm going to report you to the authorities. I'm going to hurt your family. The fear. They're not going to believe you. They're going to believe, the controller. Fear, and then mobility. Do they have to stay like in a very closed space, like that woman who had to stay in the same spot, couldn't go off the grounds. So it's not easy. It's really, if you think about vulnerable people, like I heard this person, Rachel Lloyd, speak. Rachel Lloyd is from GEMS, which is for underage domestic minors. And what she said was, you can connect with groups like ourselves, GEMS, Polaris Project, connect with them. But if you have young women that you can influence and have positive self-images and let them know that nobody can treat them like a thing, let them know that love doesn't look like exploitation, you're doing a good thing. So working with young women to develop leadership and self-identity is an important role in preventing trafficking. Working with young men to tell them what respect is, to tell them why it's important that they are part of the solution, to stop the demand, to know what is really important in life is that everyone has dignity and respect. You're doing a good thing. Okay, thank you.